Sin in Space by Cyril, Judd, Chapter 2. Trigger warnings for this chapter include the mention of miscarriages. The lab was the cash drop of Sun Lake. Mars had a slight case of radioactivity. Nothing you couldn't live with, but enough to enable Sun Lake City Colony to concentrate and isolate radioisotopes and radioactive organics for sale on Earth at better than competitive prices, even after the stiff tariff for transport. The materials handled were only mildly dangerous, but it was the doctor's job to render them effectively not dangerous at all. Twice a day, before work started in the morning and again before quitting time, Tony geigered the whole place. On this precaution the whole community depended, not only for safeguarding their sole source of income, but for their very lives. Among other things, it was the only building with a large enough room to serve for social functions, and it offered the only possible change from mud-colored walls. For isomorphic rooms, all just 15 by 15, from cement floors and wall bunks. The lab had everything the other buildings lacked: steel framework and aluminum alloy wall sheathing, copper tubing and running hot water, built-in power outlets, Earth-made furniture, even the blessings of an Earth import air filtering system. The 1-kilometer walk out to the lab in the early morning always infused the doctor with a glowing sense of confidence and well-being. In a year on Mars, he'd lost little of his first pleasure in the buoyancy afforded by the low gravity. Walking was effortless, and, in the thin air, an hour's sunlight was enough to clear the night's chill from the open spaces. At noon, the sun would be too bright. In the evening, the cold would return as suddenly as it had departed. Now, in the first part of the morning, it was like a perfect autumn day on Earth. Behind him, in the houses that lined both sides of the colony's single curved street, people were dressing hurriedly, eating, making plans, getting ready for the day's work. Ahead, the shining blue walls of the lab were set off against the magnificent backdrop of Latius Solis itself. The ancient seabed was alive again with color as the early sun's rays glinted off millions of tiny particles, the salts and minerals of Mars deposited by long-dried waters in millennia past. The clean lines of the new buildings against that sparkling expanse constituted at once a challenge and a reassurance. This is what man can do. Here is everything he needs to do it with. If we can, a second chance for man, if we can learn how to use it. Tony unlocked the storage cabinet built into the massive lead-lined door of the lab. He took out his suit of protective armor. Probably the only Earth import wearing apparel ever bought and paid for by the colony. But before he got into it, he turned to look back just once at the little huddle of houses where, a few hours ago, Polly Candro had affirmed her faith in Sun Lake's future in the most emphatic personal manner. The solidarity of the lab was a disagreeable symbol of the colony's present status. It was still the only decent structure Sun Lake had to show. Halfway up the almost imperceptible 3-kilometer slope from canal bed at his left to sea level at his right sat the colony, lumpishly. Every building, like Tony's own home and hospital, was tamped native dirt. The arc of dull rust-brown huts squatting close to the ground and close to each other presented to Tony a monotonous row of identical plastic windowed backsides. Behind them, fields A, B, C, and D showed, even from the lab, the work of Sun Lake's mud kickers, the agronomists, who, using tools as ancient as the harrow and as modern as the mutating, creating particles that stream from the cyclotron, were changing Mars plants into things that could nourish an Earth animal, and changing Earth plants into things that could draw nourishment from the grudging Martian soil. Mutated bean plants whose ancestors had been a button-bearing Mars cactus dotted Field A. Mutated cauliflowers, the size of apples, dark brown, and still manufacturing in themselves too much potassium cyanide to be edible, darkened Field B. Another few plant generations and they would be food for the colony table, though tasting somewhat of the neutralized cyanide bitter almonds. 10 kilometers beyond the fields of bastard Earth-Mars vegetation, there had been beauty only recently. The fantastically eroded rim rock hills. 5 months ago, however, the first prefab shacks had gone up in the camp on the other side of the hills. 3 months ago, the first furnace had been fired at Pitco 3, Pittsburgh Coal, Coke, and Iron Company's Mars Metal Refining Plant No. 3. Now a dirty shroud of yellow-stained smoke draped the peaks from dawn till dark. With a feeling of intense distaste, Tony started climbing into his suit of armor and began his slow trip of inspection through the building. All areas were well under the threshold of danger, as usual, except for a hot patch in the isotope room. Tony chalked a yellow line around the spot and marked the door of the room with a bright yellow cross. Finished, he headed straight for the cleanup room and checked the condition of the exterior of his suit against the bigger stationary radiation counter that was kept there. Tony moved fast, but by the time he'd put on a fresh tunic and boots and emerged into the central hall, the lab was already full of people getting set for the day's work. He edged past a knot of busy conversationalists in the corner. "Hey, Doc." He paused, and that was his undoing. "How's Polly? Tony, hold on. How's the baby? Are they all right? Doc, wait a minute. Did everything go all right? Where are they? What is it?" He answered the same questions a dozen times. It seemed that half the population of Sun Lake was in the corridor with him, and they all wanted to know the same thing. Finally, despairing of getting through until he had satisfied them all, Tony climbed up on a chair and addressed the crowd. 5 pounds, 2 ounces earth weight. A boy. Wrigglingest baby I ever saw. Plenty lively, and he looks just like his old man. What else do you want to know? How's Polly? Fine. So's Jim. The hoary joke got its inevitable laugh. Then one of the chemists said, "I make a motion for a birthday present. Let's build that other room onto the Candro house right now." It was an offer that he'd made months before, and that Polly, hesitant and slightly superstitious, had refused. "There'll be time enough after the baby's born," she told them, and stuck to it. Tony knew why. Knew about the first time 11 years before, when she'd carried a child for 7 months, and then had to pack away all the things she'd lovingly collected for its birth. They'd stayed in their cartons for 4 more years, and 2 more miscarriages, before she gave them tearfully to a luckier woman. "When is she going home, Doc?" one of the electronics men asked. "How much time have we got?" "I don't know. Maybe tomorrow morning," Tony told them. "She's in pretty good shape. It's just a matter of where she'll be most comfortable. I don't imagine she'll want to stay in the hospital very long. After all, it's not exactly designed for luxurious convalescence." They were all familiar with the crowded little room. He waited for a dutiful laugh to die down and added, "I think tomorrow will be about right. Not later than the day after." Tony escaped, made his way to the isotopes room, and was happy to find Sam Flexner, the chemist in charge, waiting for him at the yellow chalked door. Apparently, his harping on safety rules had penetrated in at least one case. Sam knew enough to stay on the spot, even in the midst of the sudden excitement over the baby. Tony opened the door and pointed out the ragged chalked circle on the floor. "Any idea what it is?" "We were running some radiophosphorus," Sam said doubtfully. "But there was no trouble on the run. Must be spillage." The chemist had a young, open face, and Tony liked him. He began to fill in the necessary report. "What reason?" Spillage was unusual. "It's a bigger order than we usually handle. Must have been 100 kilograms. Sam looked up sharply. "It was all right yesterday, wasn't it? The afternoon checkup?" Tony nodded. "Then it must have been at closing. I left a few minutes early yesterday. Figured the boys could close up all right, but I guess one of them took the lazy man's load in his tote box. Filled it up too high to save himself a trip. I'll check on it and tell them in a nice way, all right? That should do it, but I better have a look at that checkout tube." Sam brought over a tray of tubes, resting in numbered grooves. He was wearing one like them, pinned to his own lapel. The contents of the tubes was its normal, dirty white. Purple would have meant too close to hot stuff too long. "Okay," said Tony, checking his form. "That hot spot there, I think you'd better chisel it out and get one of the suppliers to take it away and dump it. Old Leroyd was here with a load of vanadium dirt. He'll do it when he leaves for Pitco. Fine, get it done. And tell Leroy to put the stuff in the back of his rig. I don't think you could kill any of those